All right, welcome to our wellness education series. This month we have Dr. Anthony Derringer and Dr. Trisha Burke here to talk to us about mindfulness. And I'm going to talk to you about WellCats real quick. I know most of you are familiar with WellCats. You guys are frequent flyers. You've been here before. But just in case, the WellCats program is your Texas State Employee Wellness Program. It is free for all benefits eligible employees. We have several different services here on campus: group exercise classes, proactive nutrition classes. We offer one-on-one nutrition consultations, WellCats education series like this one right here, and then also some other services on Teams y'all may be familiar with, our stretch breaks and our healthy snacks and nutrition hacks. You can find this and more at the WellCats website on our WellCats events calendar. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it back over to Trisha.
Hey everybody. I'm gonna get the slides ready. Oh, Jess, I need you to let me share my screen.
All right, let me see if I can figure out how to do that.
Okay. Um, Here, I sent you a request. I don't know if you got it.
There you go. How about now?
Okay. Um, I don't think I can do it yet. I might have to go out. Oh, yeah, I can. Okay. Um, all right, so I'm gonna share my slides with you guys. And can you guys see my slides okay?
We
Yes?
see the presenter view of things versus the,
Oh,
um,
okay.
yeah,
Wait.
we can see the slides
Um,
normally now.
you can see them normally now?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So, welcome to the Well Cats educational series. I'm going to be presenting with Dr. Anthony Derringer, like Jess said, and we're going to talk to you about the roots of calm, mindfulness, and nature at work, in case you're thinking about doing this mindfulness work. I skipped the slide about what is WellCats because Jess just introduced that for you, but I'll introduce myself and I'll let Anthony introduce himself. So, I'm a professor. I teach in the Department of Communication Studies, and I also have been serving on the WellCats leadership team for a while. I've done some of these WellCats educational series before, so I might have seen some of you before. And I put this picture of me in nature so that it could be kind of on theme for the day. I'm going to let Anthony introduce himself as well.
Yeah, I'm Anthony Derringer. I work in health and human performance. I'm the coordinator of the recreation program, and I'm an associate professor in the program. And my background's really outdoor recreation, but my research recently has been in mindfulness and nature connection and here by nature. So excited to talk about this.
Thank you. All right. So it seems really relevant to talk about mindfulness at work, obviously, because it can feel like a stressful environment, and also because we have such a beautiful natural environment on our campus. And so we can take advantage of that when it comes to using some of these strategies. Um, so, with regard to mindfulness, I guess the first thing to do is define what mindfulness is. Um, so, when I first heard the term mindfulness, I thought about it only with, the significant extended meditation, which is something that I've never been good at. And I never felt like I would be mindful enough to experience its benefits. But after learning a little bit more about it, I found out that you don't need to engage in long meditation sessions to see the benefits of mindfulness, but instead we can think about it as small intentional pauses that can make a big difference. And so we can do this in a whole variety of ways. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what mindfulness is and some of the different elements of mindfulness, and then I'll go into some research on different ways of being mindful, as well as different ways we can do it in the workplace. So, mindfulness is awareness cultivated by paying attention in a sustained and particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So, those are the three things I'll highlight as being purposeful, being present, and then trying to reserve judgment. And then the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction also emphasizes that sometimes he likes to add the phrase as if your life depended on it, because it does to such a profound extent. So, being purposeful simply means carving out time, eliminating distractions, and prioritizing focus. Um, so, I think there are lots of ways we can do this in our workday, but we have to be really intentional about that. So, you might set calendar reminders for yourself. You might block out time in your day to do some of these things. You might have a friend who holds you accountable to take a break outside in nature. So, all of these things are considered being purposeful. Being present involves attending to the current moment and not the past, not the future, but how you're feeling and what you're thinking right now, as well as your surrounding environment. And then the other thing in there that's important is to try to focus on this experience without judgment. And that can be really hard because it can be our natural tendency to evaluate whatever feelings we have as being good feelings or bad feelings or things we should be having or things we shouldn't be. But you can't judge the feelings you're having. You just have to acknowledge them and try to experience that in the moment in order to be mindful and be present. Um, so the next thing about mindfulness to highlight, because I've already discussed kind of that it's this active state of mind, we also want to think about how we can um, like I said, be situated in the present and be sensitive to context and perspective. Consider the rules and routines we have and how they guide our experience, as well as the experience of engagement. And so it's important to try to have this active state of mind. Don't rely on autopilot. Instead, it's important to notice the changes and respond creatively. So focus on your current task and the interactions you're having. So, for example, if you're doing a performance review and you're a supervisor, then maybe you would, instead of trying to come up with a rebuttal to the conversation that you're having, listen attentively to the employee's perspective. So, that's really being situated in the present rather than planning for the future. Also, considering how the meaning of a situation might shift depending on the people, the roles, and the environments that you're encountering, and how you might adjust your communication accordingly. So, for example, if there's a policy change in the organization, like a return to work expectations or something like that, a dean might recognize that this policy impacts faculty differently than it might impact staff. And so they might try to be sensitive to that and invite feedback before implementation. Um, Making sure that you're adhering to routines is important, but doing so without being rigid when things come up is what is most productive. So, for example, if a professor follows a syllabus, but they realize that they have a class project that is comes up at the same time as some sort of weather emergency. Like we all know that in the spring there's some day that the ice is on the roads and nobody can get to campus. And so prioritizing learning over strict deadlines is really important there. And that's an example of being routine guided rather than being rigid about routines. We can also consider the how we feel involvement in engagement in different interactions, and so how we can be mentally and emotionally engaged in the moment and not just going through the motions. So, for example, you might have a brainstorming session with your team where everyone's feeling energized and curious, and you're co-creating ideas and not just thinking about it as a required task. And so this is an experience where the everyone's feeling a sense of engagement and focusing on the current experience instead of thinking about it as just a task that's being checked off their list.
And Trisha, can I jump in real quick? I
Yeah,
just wanted to
of
say,
course.
add one thing to the, I think sometimes it's really useful to think of mindfulness in a juxtaposition to mindlessness. And I think some of the things, when we talk about rule and routine guided, but not but available to change. I think that is really the critical piece. That's the difference between mindfulness and mindlessness. And so oftentimes I think of mindlessness as, we've all been in this situation where we get in our car to drive to work, but then we realize it's Saturday and we're supposed to be going to the grocery store and we started driving to work already. And this is an instance whenever our past experiences have overdetermined our future experiences, right? And this is Ellen Langer's a kind of popular mindfulness scholar, and she works mostly in cognitive mindfulness, which is a little bit different. But she talks about how she believes that most people live most of their life in kind of a mindless state, and I think that's true. And I think it's actually it's an evolutionary um, response to threat, right? I mean, that's the way. If we look back far enough, when we're walking through the quad. We're not inspecting each tree kind of individually or even each building or each person. We have these categories and we say like tree, building, person, and we're just kind of quickly categorizing these things. And really what we're doing is kind of eliminating them as non-threats, right? We don't think of it that way, but that's kind of what we're doing. That's why whenever a squirrel runs across the path, our brain jumps to that. But our brain goes into these mindless states commonly and for good reason, right? If we spent all of our time reevaluating what a person was each time we saw a person, it wouldn't be a very efficient way to live. But our brains can get too good at kind of categorizing our experiences and can kind of go into this autopilot kind of situation. And that's really how we think of mindlessness. And so, Trisha, I dropped a slide in that I think I dropped it in too late. So oh, okay. It's not going to allow me to share. I was going to try to share it, but that's all right. We can just go on to the next thing. It's not a big deal.
Okay. Um, so do you want to like describe what's happening on the slide, or I don't know how to
It's kind of
share
hard to
it.
describe. I mean, I
Okay.
can I can try to drop it in the chat. Let's see if it'll let me drop it in the chat. Or
Okay.
I don't know if someone can make me also available to share, but if that's possible, then I can share it.
Mm,
Let me see if I can drop it.
okay. I don't know. You can try now. I think I just made it so you can.
Okay. Try. Yes. Thank you. Perfect.
Hmm.
Okay. So, um, everyone can see that all right? Okay. So
Um, not
you may not know
uh,
what you're looking at, but but this is one of those kind of ink blot drawings, right? And so I was wondering if you don't mind, if you could just put into the chat anything that you think you see in this drawing. Let me see if I can see the chat here. Anything that you think you see in the drawing. Okay, I see it side face profile, the outline of a skull, a turtle, a footprint. Okay. These are all good. And if I wish we had like a way to for you to point out where you're seeing this. I think the turtle, and correct me if I'm wrong, who said this, Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of the bottom left corner. You can kind of see the turtle shell, right? And maybe the head is like the very bottom, right? Footprint, I'm guessing is kind of in the same area, bottom left. I'm guessing that's the tread, right? Um, the reason I bring this slide up is because um, there's an image in here that once I tell you, your brain will categorize that image, and it'll be very difficult for you to see anything else but the image I tell you. And the image is a cow. So if you look kind of at the top left, we have the two biggest dark spots are the ears of the cow, and then the snout kind of comes down the middle, and the nose. I don't know if you see it, but it has two eyes kind of below the dark spots. Um, and so once you see, I see some people are seeing it. Once you see the cow, um, it becomes pretty apparent. And it's the funny thing is I've used this in presentations before, and it can be very difficult once you see the cow for your brain to unsee the cow. Like if I showed you the slide, 6 months from now, my guess is that you would see the cow immediately, right? And it's because our brain does this thing, right? It jumps to this, it categorizes and it recognizes those categories very quickly. That phenomenon is what leads us away from being mindful, right? Because we think our brain kind of jumps to the conclusion that we already know this situation. We don't have to be present in the moment because we already know this situation. And I think that's a critical piece of understanding how to be mindful is understanding where we're mindless and not being, as you mentioned, we shouldn't, be judgmental about that thought process. We just need to think about how do we remove some of those guidelines from previous experiences that are over determining what we see in the future so that we can have a little more critical look at what's happening right now, right? Um, and so I think that is the distinction between mindfulness and mindlessness. And Trisha, you can take back over on the sharing if you want.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that in more detail. I really thought that was helpful. Okay. So let me see. Can you guys see the presenter view now or the slide view? Slide view?
My view.
Okay, sweet. Um, all right. So I think that it's a really good point in how we can sometimes be um, too reliant on the patterns that we already know. And so when we can stay flexible in these systems, especially a system like higher education, where there's like this hierarchy that we understand in the organization, when everyone tries to approach their work with presence and contextual awareness and flexibility and genuine engagement, it makes it easier to respond creatively instead of reactively and to build these stronger relationships and also model intellectual curiosity, which is like the whole point of higher education, right? So I think that it's these are good practices to get better at. Oh, can you guys see the text on here, or is it too dark? I don't know. Okay, so in a study on the Harvard Business Review, there we go. They looked at mindfulness in the workplace and they looked at the timing of when people were engaging in mindfulness as well as different types of mindfulness that they were engaging in. Um, so the first study found that workers who meditate in the morning were more attentive and helpful to coworkers and customers throughout the day. These were customer service types of organizations, but I still think that that can relate to some of the different interactions that we might have in our workplace. They also looked at different kinds of meditation, including breath-based meditation and loving kindness meditation. So, breath-based meditation is where you're focusing on your breath. It's where you're trying to better understand your perspectives, including your own and others, but from a more cognitive lens and a cognitive approach. Whereas loving kindness medication is where you imagine sending kindness and goodwill to others. And so this is where you might be able to feel more or try to feel more what others are experiencing, which can help increase your empathy and connection to others in the workplace. So obviously, both of these things kind of serve different purposes in the workplace. And what the authors found is that when they looked at these different kinds of mindfulness, that loving kindness practices um, were better for when people needed to feel more accountable, when they needed to take ownership over a mistake or think about how their actions might affect other people, because this increased their feelings of empathy toward others. But when they engaged in breath-based mindfulness, they focused a lot on themselves, and so they reduced their own guilt, which kind of decreased their motivation to make amends for past wrongdoings or other situations that might affect other people. So it's important to not only integrate mindfulness at work, but understand kind of the timing of when we might do mindfulness and when that can benefit us, as well as the kind of mindfulness practices that we might use. So there's different tools that, and instead of taking a one size fits all approach, we can consider what might be helpful in different contexts. Is this something that I need to focus on a relational kind of mindfulness, or is this something where I need to just focus and relieve my own stress? And then, like, what points of day does it benefit people the most? So those are some ways to kind of break down mindfulness at work. Um, and like I said, considering good times to integrate mindfulness into your workday is important. So take notice of when you are feeling the most stress and the kind of stress you're feeling, and then make it a habit to integrate mindfulness at these moments in the day. So that's an important first step. So it might be, you're going into a meeting with a lot of people, and you take a breath before you enter the meeting, and you notice your inhale, you notice your exhale to try to clear some of that mental clutter and be able to focus on the present meeting and not what happened in the last meeting that made you stressed out, but focus on what's happening in this meeting. It might be helpful for you to visualize positive energy or goodwill toward others. If you're going into a meeting where you might be concerned about whether people are taking each other's perspectives, or whether there are um, there's some tension or something going on. And so this could be maybe before you send an email that where someone frustrated you, or you have a student complaining about grades, or something else like that. You might use this type of mindfulness in those situations, and find times to reset during challenging work and projects. So step away from your screen, stretch, um, try to reset between these different challenges that you might have, and try to think about the feelings, observe the feelings you're having, and choose a constructive response. So mindfulness at work is not necessarily supposed to add to your to-do list. We're all busy. It's not supposed to be one more thing to check off in your day, but it's more about transforming your workday experience and trying to have this present moment awareness and create more space for focus and kindness and balance and all those things in the workplace. So we have a lot of opportunities at Texas State. We have different classes that you might consider taking, like the sunrise flow and the golden hour flow. These are both on Zoom. Mindful movement and meditation on Mondays, afternoon stretch breaks. So all of these things can be really helpful in terms of finding ways to integrate mindfulness into your day, while you're at Texas State and you're trying to take breaths and energize others and visualize positive goodwill and all those things, and reset during your work time. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Anthony again, who's going to continue on for the next few slides.
Great, thanks. Yeah,
Um,
and so I think, one of the other, and we this was mentioned earlier, but one of the other assets we have at Texas State is we have some great outdoor areas. And so there's a bunch of, and I'm sure many of you are aware, there's a bunch of research on well-being and kind of this nebulous topic of what it takes to be to have health and good well-being, and some common things that are common, that are associated with good well-being is stress mitigation, physical activity, social contact, and in my field, nature connection, or being in nature. And so, like I said, we have some great opportunities on campus of places we can be in nature. And I think oftentimes when we think of going to nature, or visiting a natural area, we think that in order to be in nature and get the benefits of being in nature, we need to go to Spring Lake, or we need to go to Enchanted Rock or Yosemite, right? Or one of these large, well-known kind of natural areas. But there's been a lot of really good research in the last 20 years that kind of analyzes how humans respond to nature in all kinds of settings, even virtual nature, and nature that's in artwork. And what that research suggests is that actually we can get a lot of the benefits of being in nature from a very kind of urban, or close nature interaction. And so we don't actually need to go to a place where there's running water, or a place where there's mountains. We can get a lot of the benefits, the well-being benefits, of being in nature, right where we are. And so, can you go to the next slide? So on the next slide, I have a quote. This is a quote from Desert Solitaire from Edward Abbey, and you can read it. But what he's saying here is that we're able to use lots of different types of places in order to feel a sense of connection. Um, you know, Connection with places is a big topic in education and in a lot of fields right now. And I think um, what Ed Rab is saying here is that we have humans have the ability to make places wherever we are, and certainly we've made places in our workplace as well. But we can also use some of those places. In this case, um, the quad or a number of places around campus in order to connect with nature. And we did a study. The paper should be published in the next 6 months or so. It's in review right now. But it was a paper where we asked students to go to different nature areas around campus. One of them was Spring Lake, and then the other one was up on the quad, kind of by the Bobcat statue, if you know where that is. It's kind of in this pretty busy area of the quad. And we had a group that was in a mindfulness group in each one of those spots and a non-mindful group in each one of those spots. And we asked them to rate their nature connection before and after on a state scale. And then we asked them some qualitative interview questions. We did kind of focus group afterwards. And some takeaways from that study were that one, people felt a really similar nature connection in both spots. They didn't, again, they didn't need to be at Spring Lake to feel a connection to nature. And two, that mindfulness enhanced that nature connection, primarily in the way that it reduced the number of distractions that they experienced. One of the things I thought was interesting is that in every group except for the mindfulness quad group, people in the study suggested that they were kind of thinking about their phone or tempted to pull out their phone or saw their people's on the phones came up throughout. But the only group that didn't come out, that no one talked about phones, was the group that was doing the mindfulness exercise in the quad. And I think it's interesting because it allows us to think of places like the quad, which have, we were out there during passing periods when tons of students were walking around on their phones, doing all kinds of things, right? But also the students who were in our study were surrounded by more buildings than they were natural elements, right? But we also had some really cool, I don't know how old the trees are out there, but they look pretty old, 100-year-old oak trees or more probably. Some really old, beautiful trees. And there's also, as you know, if you've walked on the quad, there's some native landscaping all throughout the quad. And so there are some really interesting spots that can give a sense of nature connection. Trisha, if you go to the next slide, here's a couple of examples of places that we have close that provide kind of a traditional sense of nature connection, and places that you could go where, within a 5-minute drive. I don't know if Purgatory is quite a 5-minute drive, but close to it, right? Within a 5 or 10 minute drive of campus. The big picture on the left is up at Spring Lake, and you can walk to Spring Lake, or there's a bus route that goes over to Spring Lake. And it's a really cool place to go and to connect with nature, with or without the use of mindfulness. But I think particularly a good spot to go with a mindfulness exercise. And in a few minutes, I'll give you an example of a mindfulness exercise you might use. But this is the kind of place that typically, we think of when we think of nature. And so, Trisha, if you can go to the next slide. Here are some places, some examples of different places that we may not think of nature as nature places, but certainly can be nature places. So the top left-hand picture is a picture of the park next to the Lions Club. It's being remodeled right now, so it doesn't look like this anymore. But this was the old park that was there, and it's a pretty busy place. There's quite a bit of commotion around, but you're also close to the river, and this is certainly a place where a person can connect with nature. And then some of the research that's happened in the last few years talks about historic town squares as places that you could connect with nature. And it's difficult to kind of draw out the particular elements of that experience that makes nature connection possible. But people do experience nature in these places, probably due to older trees and vegetation around. But the bottom right is a picture of the Wimberley downtown area. It's kind of a historic downtown area, and you can see even in this picture that there are elements of nature that are available there, and that particularly if you were mindful about it, you could experience nature there. The top right and the bottom left are both examples of biophilic architecture, and so these are places where people have created buildings with the intention of creating spaces to connect with nature, and making sure that those natural elements are kind of at the forefront of the design. And these are really cool opportunities for people to connect with nature, especially using the tools of mindfulness that Tricia talked about, and that we'll show you here in a minute. And I think, um, like I said in the beginning, there's there's a tendency for us to think, if I want to connect with nature, I have to go somewhere far away. I have to travel to a park somewhere, and I have to devote a day to doing this. But one of the things we know, and actually, Tricia, if you go to the next slide, I think it's on the next slide here. Oh, sorry. Go one more, actually. We'll come back to that one. But one of the things that we know is that if you go to Yosemite, you are likely to experience nature, right? It would be hard to go there and not experience nature. But the chances that I have in my life to go to Yosemite are pretty, seldom, right? I don't get to go there often. There's a lot of cost involved with that. I'd have to get a flight, and I have children, so I'd have to figure out how I'm going to take them or what to do with them if I don't take these. So there's a lot of logistics there, right? And so if we can find nature connection to only places like Yosemite or even Enchanted Rock, right? Or maybe the closer one would be Pedernales Falls State Park. If we confine nature to just those places, then we eliminate the opportunity to do things that are closer and that are more easily accessible and that are part of our everyday lives. A study we did during COVID, we looked at nature along the paths that people travel, right? And on our daily basis, most of us travel past some form of nature. Um, and if we're mindful about those pieces of nature, we can gain some benefit from connecting with those pieces of nature. And one of the things I talk a lot about with students is even just knowing the names. In Texas, I always joke that we only have 10 trees in Texas. We have more than that, but there's not that many trees in Texas to learn. And if you learn 10 trees in Texas, you really probably would know like 80 or 90% of the trees that you see on a daily basis. If you don't count like the subspecies of oak, I guess. But for the most part, you would know most of the trees that you're going to see. And even just knowing names of plants and animals in a space that you walk through often can be very gratifying and connecting. And then when you incorporate mindfulness and you come into those places with some curiosity, with some concentration, and you remove those kind of previously formed categories about knowing the places, you can really gain a lot of positive health benefits and psychological benefits from local nature places. And the list here is pretty good, right? The things that local nature does for us is similar to the things that far nature can do for us. But the difference is that it's familiar. And so, when you walk through the quad, you know some things that are there, you know what to expect. And that can be a barrier for folks. If you're going into an unfamiliar place, it can be, scary and you don't want to do it. And so having nearby nature creates nature that's familiar and that feels comfortable for people. It's also accessible, right? If we can find nature along our normal travel paths, then we can access that nature on a daily or weekly or whatever basis, right? And so it can be a really useful thing to be able to access nature on a daily basis. And then I want to talk a little bit about this third bullet here, that it promotes place-based or local culture connections. One of the cool things about nearby nature is that it helps us to explore our own places and to know our own places better. You know, I don't know how many of you spend time walking around campus. I don't walk around campus that often. And every time I do walk around campus, I find new things that I didn't know existed on campus. And so, you know, if we're exploring the nature spots on campus, it does two things. One, it can benefit us in the way that we talked about earlier, where we're gaining some of these psychological and physiological benefits of being in nature, but it also helps us connect with our place. It helps us to know our place more, to understand it and respect it more, and that has a lot of benefits also. And the last bullet there is connected to that, right? That it can encourage local environmental action. Once we adopt a place as ours, and we have a connection with that place, we tend to care a little bit more about it and take better care of it. And I think that's kind of the gist of that, is that whenever we're out in local nature, particularly with the use of mindfulness, we can be a positive for the environment in that area as well. If you want to go to the next one, Trisha. So we have, we talked about earlier, we have several really excellent nearby nature um, options, and I would say that we're we're super lucky, right? Most college campuses don't have this beautiful, clear flowing 72-degree river flowing through them, and so that's kind of an easy one, right? I mean, we have the San Marcos River, which is right on campus, and uh, even if you don't want to go to Sewell Park, which is here in the picture, there are plenty of places downstream that are less filled with students and maybe have a little more space to get away from other people and have a nature experience. But we have really good access, and in the last couple of years, I'm sure many of you know, we have a great paved path that goes all the way to almost to 35, and so we have a couple miles to walk along the river, and it's just a really really beautiful spot. Um, and then we've already talked about the quad, so we won't continue with that one. Um, but I wanted to give you one activity that I think is kind of a fun one, and I can in a second I'll drop this activity in the chat. I think I can put a Word document in the chat, but we'll just do it verbally right now. So this is an activity that we do. One of the things that I work on every year is we have an after school program that we do at the Meadow Center for local middle school students, and it ranges depending on grant funding, but somewhere between 5 and 8 weeks. We do it twice a week, and our students go out and they do outdoor activities with middle school students from Miller and Goodnight. And it's been a really good thing for our program. It's been really cool to have our students interacting with the middle school students. But one of the activities that they love to do is this one, and we call it opening the senses. And so this activity works best when you're outdoors, but we can also do it in our office if we want. But it works best when you're outdoors. And the goal of the activity is really it's a mindfulness activity. It's to get folks to recognize the things that are around them, that may have always been around them, or that they've become kind of used to, and that they've stopped recognizing. And so the first thing we do is we talk about how many animals have kind of a superpower, right? That's usually the way I phrase it with kids, but some sort of strength. And one of the things we talk about with owls is that they're not actually able to move their eyes, but they have this really wide peripheral view, and they can turn their head all the 180 degrees, right? And so they have this flexibility in their neck. And so what I get the kids to do is to put their arms out to the side, looking straight ahead and without moving their eyes, and to move their arms in until they can see both of their arms, right, within their peripheral view. And what that does is it establishes what our peripheral view is, and then I try to get them to notice things that are in their peripheral view that they hadn't noticed before. So I ask them to still not move their eyes. They can put their arms down, but still not move their eyes, and try to call out things that are in their peripheral view that they hadn't noticed until they stopped and tried to notice them. And so we talk about that for a while, and that's a fun one. But my favorite one by far, and we won't go through all these, my favorite one by far is the deer ears. And I have all this printed out. Like I said, I'll drop in the chat in a minute. But the deer ears, we talk about, everyone in Central Texas has seen a deer, right? Because if you drive on the highway in the evenings, you're going to see deer, and so it's an easy one for kids to connect with. But we talk about how deer have these kind of satellite ears, right, where they move them to catch sound. And so we start with telling the students, all right, we want everyone to be quiet. We're gonna be quiet for 5 seconds, and I want you to try to hear all of the sounds that you can hear. And so we take the 5 seconds, and then we come back together and we let people kind of talk about what they hear. And people will inevitably say, "Oh, I hear a car in the distance, or I hear a motorcycle, or I hear, maybe they hear some grass rustling or whatever." And then we ask the students to take their satellite ears and to cup them over their ears and to start to move the cups around their ears and see what things they can identify, what things they can hear that they didn't hear before. And again, this is a mindfulness activity, right? It allows students to break out these audible pieces of information into multiple uh, experiences, right? So we ask them, now what are some things that you didn't hear before? And inevitably they come up with things that they didn't hear before. Oh, when I put my ears like this, I heard the wind blowing behind me that I didn't hear before. Or I heard ripples in the lake, or I heard, whatever the things are. And this activity, I think the thing that we're trying to get them to notice is that whenever they're walking through the Meadow Center, um, they're not noticing all the things that are happening, right? We're missing a lot. We all do it as humans. When we're walking down the trail, we're missing all kinds of things. And when we stop and we focus on our senses, we can take in a lot more. Um, Another one that's really fun is the dog nose. We talk about how, I have a little thing, again, I'll drop it in, but a little thing that talks about how well dogs smell and how good their noses are. And then we actually will have them, if they will, we don't force anybody, but we have them get down on their knees on the ground somewhere and try to smell something that they haven't smelled before. And then we have them stand up and smell maybe near a tree or a bush and see if they can get a smell from that. And I think it doesn't always work. It depends on kind of the time of the season. But I feel like whenever that works, it's a really powerful experience for them because they didn't know that there are kind of columns of smell as they go up, right? As they stand up or as they move down, there are different smells for them to smell. And I think that's one of those things that when you discover that for the first time, it can be a little bit jarring in that you realize like, oh, there's all these things going on around me that I didn't know about and that I don't experience normally. But if I stop, I can. Um, and to me, for a kid, that's really the essence of a mindfulness experience, right? Is this idea that I'm present in the moment, I'm blocking out all of these distractions and trying to focus on what's here right now. And if I do that, it opens up new things to me that I didn't know before. And like I said, I'll drop this in the chat, but I would encourage you next time you're out to try some of them. I can be found commonly doing the deer ears in different spots, unprovoked, because I think it's kind of cool, right? I want to try to hear things that I haven't heard before, and so I encourage you to try them if you get a chance. It's actually a pretty fun activity for adults or kids. And I was at a conference a little over a week ago, and I had everyone in the conference do deer ears, and I think they liked it. So it can be done with adults as well. So Trisha, I think that's my last one. I think you might be on the next one.
Yep. Okay, that's awesome. I love that. Um, so the other thing that I wanted to bring up as we kind of wrap up our conversation about mindfulness here, in addition to adopting all of these awesome nature activities outside to enjoy our local nearby nature and how we can recognize the things that maybe we didn't quite pay attention to before, we can also think about other ways to um, integrate some mindfulness practices into the workplace that are related to this project that's called the Big Joy Project, which I bring up because I think it's relevant given the timing of this presentation right before Thanksgiving when we're focusing on and the holidays when we're focusing on making other people happy and experiencing gratitude and all those kinds of things. Um, so this is one thing that could be a way for you to practice one of those loving kindness meditation or mindfulness activities. These micro acts of joy, 5 to 10 minutes daily. Try to do it for 7 days, and then maybe you can formulate a habit or some strategies that you can integrate into your workday. So one is shifting your perspective, and when people do this, you can think about a recent time where you felt frustrated or upset or anxious, and then write something positive that came out of it. Maybe there's more than one positive thing that came out of it that you can identify. And so this can help shift your perspective from focusing on the frustration to focusing on something productive or valuable that came from that frustration. Tuning into what matters. So thinking about different values. Virtue, fairness, goodwill, unity, and then how these different values are important to you and how they appear in your life. Another thing, of course, is making a gratitude list. So, thinking about things that you feel grateful for and why you're grateful for them. Another way to do this is dwelling in awe. And so, this is watching you might watch an awe-inspiring video and then reflect on that video. And so if we're talking about nature, it could be something in nature. You could watch a video of, wildlife in Yosemite and then reflect on what you liked or what you felt when you were watching it. Um, so those are some examples. Be a force of good. So try to think about what you can do to contribute to goodness in the world, put that back out so that you can get it back, and doing something kind. So think of 5 individuals you might see one day, and then one thing you could do to brighten each of their days. That is, being very purposeful and reflective about how you can put these things into your workplace and build that culture of kindness. And then celebrating another's joy. So finding someone else to talk to and asking them to share something that makes them happy, something that's fun or inspiring or proud that they're proud of. I really actually like to do this with my kids. So for those of you who have kids, you know that if you ask them, how was your day? That you just get nothing from them, right? But if you ask them something a little bit more specific, then they might bring up some more um, thoughtful conversation with you. So I oftentimes will say to one of my kids, like, hey, tell me something fun that happened at school today. Or tell me something that you felt really proud of at school today. Or can you tell me something silly that happened? Or can you tell me when another friend helped your friend helped each other or something like that? And so in asking really focused questions, like that example is obviously of my kids, but you can do this in the workplace too. And you can do this in your other relationships where you're asking more specific questions and then trying to celebrate those things with them. So I included some links here, and there's links in this presentation. I will include a link to the presentation in the chat so you guys can get whatever you want out of the slides and out of those links as well. But I think these micro acts of joy and the ways in which we can integrate them and focus on the present and like have resets of our perspective and engage in these loving kindness practices are really valuable opportunities for us to infuse our work life with mindfulness activities that could benefit us and that could benefit our colleagues. So I guess beyond some of the examples that I put here, if you all can think of other ways to incorporate these activities into work, I would love to see them. You can share them in the chat, feel free. Um, and then it looks like someone else put an opportunity um, in the chat as well. So people, please feel free to share in here different resources or different strategies that you might be able to think of that would help us all understand how we can incorporate these things into work. And then beyond that, our last slide is just, if you have questions for us. And this is a really beautiful courtyard that, like Anthony was saying, there's elements of nature in there, even though it's kind of busy and bustling around campus in that spot.